A shocking new report is sending tremors through the little people, big world community, raising disturbing questions about trust, vulnerability, and the very foundation of Matt Roloff's future. We have received confirmed reports from sources close to the family that suggest a deeply unsettling event took place during one of Matt's most vulnerable moments. The story involves a routine surgery, a stack of confusing paperwork, and a secret signing that could strip the Roloff children of their inheritance and place absolute power into the hands of one person, Caryn Chandler. Did Caryn Chandler orchestrate a calculated deception, exploiting Matt's medical crisis to secure an ironclad grip on his life and his multi-million-dollar estate? The evidence we've uncovered is staggering and points to a potential betrayal of the highest order. This isn't just about the farm anymore. This is about everything. Before we dive into the explosive details of this exclusive report, please take a moment to support our channel. If you believe in uncovering the truth and want to stay ahead of all the breaking LPBW news, hit that like button, subscribe to LPBW Update, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss a single update. Your support allows us to continue our deep dive investigations. Now, let's get into the story that could change the Roloff dynasty forever. Our story begins not with a dramatic fight or a public spectacle, but in the quiet, sterile corridors of a hospital. As many of you know, Matt Roloff has battled a lifetime of health challenges related to his dwarfism. He's undergone numerous surgeries, each one carrying its own set of risks and a long, arduous recovery period. Recently, sources indicate Matt was scheduled for another significant procedure. While described to the public and even some family members as routine, we've learned from an insider with knowledge of his medical condition that this surgery was far more complex than was let on. It involved delicate spinal work, a procedure that carried a significant risk of complications and required a lengthy and intensive recovery. In the weeks leading up to the surgery, Matt was reportedly in considerable pain and experiencing a level of anxiety he hadn't felt in years. He was becoming more and more dependent on Caryn for his daily needs, from simple household tasks to managing his complex schedule. This dependency, we are told, was the key. Caryn, ever the efficient manager, stepped up to the plate, handling every detail with precision. She was the gatekeeper of his calls, the scheduler of his appointments, and his primary source of emotional support. On the surface, it was the picture of a devoted partner caring for the man she loves. But beneath that surface, a different narrative was allegedly taking shape. A source very close to the situation, who has requested anonymity for fear of reprisal, revealed that Caryn had been growing increasingly anxious about her own future. Despite her long-term relationship with Matt and her integral role in his life in the operations of Roloff Farms, she possessed no legal standing. She wasn't his wife. Her name wasn't on the deeds to the property. In the eyes of the law, if Matt were to become incapacitated or worse, she could be left with nothing, potentially even asked to leave the farm by Matt's children, who would legally be in control of his estate. This fear, the source claims, had become an obsession. She had allegedly broached the topic of marriage with Matt on several occasions, but he remained hesitant, still scarred by his costly divorce from Amy. With this major surgery looming, Caryn's window of opportunity to secure her position was closing, and her anxiety was at an all-time high. She needed a guarantee, a legal document that would make her untouchable, and she needed it before Matt went under the knife. This brings us to the day of the surgery. The atmosphere in the pre-op room was tense. The air was thick with the scent of antiseptic and the low hum of medical equipment. Matt, dressed in a flimsy hospital gown, was reportedly disoriented and groggy from the preoperative medications he had been given. He was in pain, nervous, and utterly reliant on Caryn, who sat by his side, holding his hand and speaking to him in soothing tones. Nurses bustled in and out, checking vitals, asking repetitive questions, and thrusting clipboards with consent forms at him. It was a scene of controlled chaos, the perfect environment for a subtle but significant act of deception to go unnoticed. It was in this moment, with Matt's cognitive state compromised by medication, pain, and stress, that Caryn allegedly made her move. She produced a thick leather-bound folder, far more substantial than the simple hospital clipboards. An eyewitness, a hospital staffer who spoke to our investigative team, described the scene. She was very calm, very reassuring, the staffer recalled. She told him, "Honey, these are just the last of the hospital consent forms you need to sign before they take you back. We need to get through these quickly." She opened the folder, and Matt was faced with a daunting stack of dozens of pages filled with dense legalistic text. Caryn didn't give him time to read. She didn't explain the contents. Instead, she expertly flipped through the pages, her finger landing on signature line after signature line. Sign here and here. This one is for anesthesia. This one is for the post-op care plan. Just a few more, honey. You're doing great. Matt, trusting her completely, did as he was told, his hand shaky as he scrawled his name where she pointed. But buried deep within that stack of standard medical releases, consent forms, and insurance paperwork were several pages that looked very different. These pages were not from the hospital. They were durable power of attorney documents. Our source confirms that two critical documents were hidden in that folder. The first was a medical power of attorney, giving Caryn the absolute and final say on all of Matt's medical decisions, overriding any input from his children. The second and far more explosive document was a financial power of attorney. This wasn't a limited agreement. It was sweeping and total. It granted Caryn complete control over all of Matt's assets, his bank accounts, his investment portfolios, his personal property, and most importantly, his majority stake in Roloff Farms. In the span of less than 5 minutes, in a fog of pain and pre-medication, Matt Roloff had allegedly signed over his entire empire, and he had no idea. The surgery was a success, and Matt was moved to the recovery wing. The family breathed a collective sigh of relief. Zach, in particular, stepped up to help coordinate his father's care. He had been in constant contact with the hospital, ensuring Matt was getting the best possible treatment. It was during one of these routine conversations that the first red flag appeared. Zach was on the phone with the hospital's patient advocate, a friendly woman named Susan, discussing the plan for Matt's physical therapy and at-home care. They were going over the list of approved family members who could receive medical updates. Towards the end of the call, Susan said something that made the blood run cold in Zach's veins. She said, "It's all much simpler now, of course. It's good that his new POA, Caryn, is here to handle everything. She has all the authority she needs to approve the care plan." Zach was speechless. A wave of confusion washed over him. "New POA?" He stammered. "I'm sorry, what did you say? His POA?" Susan, sensing his confusion, replied, "Yes, Caryn Chandler. She's listed as his sole power of attorney. The documents were added to his file just before surgery." Zach hung up the phone, his mind racing. This was impossible. It had to be a mistake. For years, as long as he could remember, he and his twin brother, Jeremy, were designated as Matt's co-powers of attorney. It was a plan his father had put in place long ago, a safeguard to ensure that his sons would be the ones to make critical decisions if he were ever unable. The idea that his father would change this arrangement, a cornerstone of their family's future planning, without so much as a conversation, was unthinkable. And to make Caryn the sole POA, it defied all logic. His father had always been a shrewd businessman, meticulous about keeping his personal relationships separate from his legal and financial affairs. Why would he suddenly, on the eve of a major surgery, consolidate all of that power and hand it to his girlfriend? The patient advocate's casual words had planted a seed of doubt, and that seed was now growing into a tree of suspicion. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that something was terribly wrong. Alarmed and deeply unsettled, Zach's first call was to the family's longtime lawyer, a man who had handled the Roloffs' affairs for decades. He explained the bizarre conversation with the patient advocate. The lawyer was equally stunned. He assured Zach that according to his files, the existing power of attorney naming Zach and Jeremy was still the official document. There had been no communication from Matt about making any changes. "Let me make some calls, Zach. I'll check the county registrar's office immediately. If a new POA was filed, it would have to be recorded," the lawyer promised. The wait was agonizing. 2 hours later, the lawyer called back, his voice grim. "Zach, I don't know how to tell you this," he began, but the patient advocate was correct. A new durable power of attorney was filed with the county clerk's office 3 days ago, the morning of your father's surgery. It revokes all previous POAs and names Caryn Chandler as the sole agent. It's ironclad. Zach felt the floor drop out from under him. It was true. The lawyer, sensing the shock in Zach's silence, continued, "I've requested an expedited digital copy of the document. I should have it within the hour. There's something else. Zach, the notarization, it wasn't done at a bank or a law office. The notary stamp belongs to a mobile notary service." An hour later, an email landed in Zach's inbox. The subject line was stark. Urgent POA documentation. He opened the attached file, and there it was, scanned in high resolution. A legally binding document that effectively erased him and his brother from their father's emergency plans. As he scrolled through the pages of dense legal text, his eyes landed on the signature page. He saw his father's familiar signature, but it was wrong. It was shaky, erratic, the letters barely formed. It looked like the signature of someone who was either in immense pain or not in their right mind. It was not the firm, confident signature he had seen on countless documents his entire life. Then he saw the notary's seal. It was from a company called Quick Sign Mobile Notary. The lawyer's investigation had already uncovered more details. The mobile notary had been paid in cash by Caryn Chandler and had been dispatched to the hospital. The timestamp on the notarization was just 30 minutes before Matt was wheeled into the operating room. The pieces of the puzzle were clicking into place, forming a horrifying picture. Caryn, knowing Matt was medicated and vulnerable. A thick stack of papers misrepresented as routine forms. A mobile notary, hired and paid for by her, arriving at the most opportune moment. A shaky signature on a life-altering document. This wasn't a simple change of mind by his father. This felt like a meticulously planned and executed coup. The lawyer confirmed his darkest fears. The document was, on its face, legal. A signature and a notary seal are powerful things. Challenging it would mean proving Matt was not of sound mind or was under duress when he signed it. A difficult, expensive, and ugly legal battle that would pit son against father's partner in a public court. Zach was now faced with an impossible dilemma. His father was still in the fragile early stages of recovery. Confronting him with this information could cause a massive setback to his health. But staying silent meant allowing Caryn to maintain this newfound absolute power. Power she had allegedly obtained through deception. This was no longer just a family squabble. This was a calculated seizure of control, and Zach was the only one who knew the truth. He looked at the scanned document again, at his father's faltering signature, and knew that a storm was coming, one that threatened to tear the Roloff family apart for good. The confrontation was inevitable, but the fallout was unimaginable. Matt was at home, recovering slowly, with Caryn playing the part of the devoted caregiver, fluffing his pillows and bringing him his medication, all while holding the keys to his entire kingdom. Every day that passed, her power solidified. Zach knew he had to act, and soon. He began to plan the most difficult conversation of his life, gathering the evidence, the lawyer's report, the copy of the document, the information about the mobile notary. He would have to present his father with proof of the ultimate betrayal, a betrayal orchestrated by the woman sleeping in the room next to his. The quiet farmhouse, once a symbol of family and legacy, had become the backdrop for a silent, high-stakes power struggle. And Matt Roloff, the patriarch at the center of it all, was completely unaware that he had become a pawn in a game he never even knew he was playing. When the time was right, weeks after the surgery, when Matt was finally clear-headed and beginning to feel more like himself, Zach made his move. He arrived at the farmhouse on a quiet afternoon, finding his father resting in his favorite armchair, looking out over the fields. Caryn was out running errands, a rare window of opportunity. With a heavy heart, Zach sat down opposite his father. He didn't start with accusations. He started with a question. "Dad," he said softly, "I need to ask you about some paperwork from the day of your surgery. Do you remember everything you signed?" Matt waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, who knows? A million things. The usual hospital nonsense, consent forms, insurance stuff. Caryn handled it all, thank goodness. I was so out of it." That was the opening Zach needed. He calmly laid out the facts, his voice steady despite the turmoil he felt inside. He told his father about the conversation with the patient advocate. He explained the call with the family lawyer. And then he produced the document, a printed copy of the new power of attorney. "Dad, this was in that stack of papers. This gives Caryn complete control over everything. Your medical decisions, your finances, the farm. It replaces the one you made with me and Jeremy." Matt squinted at the paper, a look of pure confusion on his face. "What? That can't be right. That's not what I signed." He took the papers from Zach's hand, his own hands now steady. He read the title at the top, Durable Power of Attorney. He saw the clauses granting sweeping unconditional power. He flipped to the last page and stared at his own signature. He traced it with his finger, a look of dawning horror spreading across his features. The shaky, uncertain scrawl was his, but the memory of the intent behind it was a complete blank. He looked up at Zach, his eyes wide with a terrible understanding. "I don't remember this," he whispered. "I only remember signing routine forms. She told me, she said it was just hospital paperwork." In that moment, the carefully constructed facade of the past few weeks shattered. The image of Caryn as the selfless, loving caregiver was replaced by a cold, calculating opportunist. He realized she had used his moment of ultimate weakness, his fear and his pain, not to protect him, but to protect herself. She hadn't earned his trust to be given this power. She had stolen it while he was incapacitated. It wasn't an act of love. It was a cold, calculated transaction for control and security, a betrayal so profound it took his breath away. The quiet farmhouse was suddenly filled with the deafening silence of a trust that had been irrevocably broken. A new war for the Roloff legacy had just begun. The heavy silence in the room was broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, each tick a hammer blow against Matt's fractured sense of reality. He sat there long after Zach had left, the damning document resting on his lap. It felt alien, foreign, a legal parasite that had attached itself to his life without his consent. He replayed the scene in the pre-op room in his mind, but it was a blurry, distorted memory, like a movie seen through water. He remembered the sting of the IV, the low murmur of voices, the feeling of a pen in his hand, and he remembered Caryn's face, her expression of calm, reassuring control. At the time, he had seen it as a comfort. Now he saw it as the mask of a predator. Every kind word, every gentle touch from that day was now tainted, recontextualized as a step in a meticulously choreographed deception. The trust he had placed in her, the foundation upon which their entire relationship was built, had been a lie. He felt a profound sense of violation, not just of his finances, but of his very personhood. She had seen his vulnerability not as something to be protected, but as an opportunity to be exploited. When he heard Caryn's car pull into the driveway, a cold, hard anger he hadn't felt in years began to solidify in his gut. He didn't move from his chair, he simply waited. She walked in, humming a cheerful tune, carrying a bag of groceries. "Hey, honey, I got that special bread you like," she said, her voice bright and normal. It was the normality that was so jarring. She was acting as if it were just another Tuesday, while his entire world had been upended. He didn't answer. He just watched her. She finally noticed his silence, his rigid posture, the papers on his lap. Her smile faltered. "Matt, is everything okay? You look pale." He lifted the power of attorney document with a trembling hand. "I had a talk with Zachary," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "He got this from the lawyer. Do you recognize it, Caryn?" Caryn's face went through a flicker of emotions, surprise, then recognition, then a carefully constructed mask of concern. She put down the grocery bag and rushed to his side, kneeling before him. "Oh, honey, that. I was going to talk to you about that when you were stronger. The lawyer said we needed to get it done before the surgery, just in case. You know how disorganized everything was." She reached for his hand, but he pulled it away. "Don't," he commanded, his voice sharp. "Don't touch me. You told me it was hospital consent forms. I remember it, Caryn. You said, these are just the last of the hospital forms." Her eyes welled with tears, a performance he now saw with sickening clarity. "Matt, you were so medicated. You were confused. We had discussed this weeks before, remember? About making sure I could take care of you, that I could talk to the doctors and pay the bills if you couldn't. You agreed it was a good idea. The hospital paperwork was just the most convenient time to get the signature. I was just trying to protect us, to protect you." It was a masterful display of gaslighting. She was using his compromised memory against him, planting a false narrative of a prior agreement that had never happened. She was twisting her act of calculated self-interest into one of selfless love. But the evidence was too stark, the betrayal too fresh. "Protect me or protect yourself," Matt shot back. "Zach and Jeremy were my power of attorney. My sons, did you think I'd forget that? Did you think I would just cast them aside and give you, my girlfriend, total control over my life's work, my children's legacy, without a single conversation?" Caryn's tears now seemed genuine, but they were tears of frustration, not remorse. Her voice took on a sharper, more defensive edge. "Your sons? Matt, be realistic. If something happened to you, they would fight over every single thing. The farm would be torn apart in months. I am the one who runs this place with you, day in and day out. I am the one who knows what you want. It was the responsible thing to do. It was for the good of the farm, your legacy." She was no longer trying to soothe him. She was trying to justify the unjustifiable, framing her power grab as a necessary evil to save him from his own family. Matt looked at the woman kneeling before him, a woman he thought he knew and loved, and saw a stranger. "Get out," he said, the words barely a whisper. "What?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Get out," he repeated, louder this time. "I need to think, and I can't do it with you in this house." Meanwhile, Zach had immediately called Jeremy. The conversation was brief and grim. Jeremy's reaction was a stark contrast to Zach's quiet shock. It was pure, unadulterated rage. "She did what? A mobile notary? While he was drugged? I'm going over there right now," Jeremy seethed. Zach managed to calm him down, explaining that their father now knew the truth and that they needed a strategy, not a shouting match. They agreed to form a united front. This was not a time for division. They needed to act as one to protect their father and their family's future. They made a pact to keep this between them and their father for now. Involving Molly or Jacob would only create more chaos, and telling their mother, Amy, would open a whole other Pandora's box they weren't ready for. Their immediate priority was to undo the damage. Their first step was a conference call with the family lawyer the next morning. The lawyer laid out the grim reality of their situation. Legally speaking, this is a nightmare, he explained, his voice tired. The document is executed and notarized. On its face, it's valid. To have it nullified by a court, we would have to prove that Matt lacked the mental capacity to understand what he was signing, or that he was under undue influence from Caryn. Both are incredibly difficult to prove after the fact. It becomes a he said, she said situation, and Caryn will claim they discussed it beforehand, and he simply forgot due to the medication. The lawyer's words were a bucket of cold water. This wasn't going to be a simple fix. So what do we do? Zach asked, the frustration evident in his voice. Our best move, the lawyer advised, is not to challenge the old document, but to supersede it with a new one. Matt is of sound mind and body now. We can draft a new power of attorney, naming you and Jeremy again, and specifically revoking the one naming Caryn. We need to get him to sign it, have it notarized by an unimpeachable source, and file it immediately. We also need a doctor to sign a statement affirming Matt's cognitive clarity at the time of this new signing. It's our strongest play. The plan seemed solid. Zach and Jeremy felt a glimmer of hope, but they had underestimated their opponent. Caryn had not left the farm. Sources say she moved into the guest house, giving Matt his space, but remaining a constant, hovering presence. She was biding her time, waiting for his anger to cool, ready to launch the next phase of her campaign to win back his trust, or, at the very least, maintain her control. When she got wind of the boys' plan to have Matt sign a new POA, perhaps by seeing a scheduled appointment on a shared calendar or overhearing a phone call, she acted with swift and chilling precision. She invoked the very power she had deceptively obtained. An insider at Matt's primary care physician's office reports that Caryn called the office, identifying herself as Matt's sole medical power of attorney. She instructed the clinic that Matt was still suffering from post-operative confusion and was being pressured and manipulated by his sons. She stated that as his POA, she was restricting access to his medical information and that any appointments or evaluations concerning his mental state had to be scheduled and approved through her. She had effectively turned the key in the lock, using the medical POA to block the very means by which Matt could legally prove his competence to revoke her financial POA. She had created a perfect legal prison. Her power plays didn't stop there. With the financial controls now firmly in her grasp, she began to make subtle but significant changes. A source with access to their financial records claims that a new joint checking account was opened, and large sums of money were transferred from Matt's personal accounts into it. When Matt questioned it, she explained it away as streamlining the bill-paying process while you recover. She hired an outside agricultural consultant, a man sources say is a close personal friend of hers from Arizona, to perform a comprehensive assessment of Roloff Farms. The stated purpose was to maximize profitability, but the unspoken purpose was to place an ally in a position of influence over the farm's future, someone who would report directly to her. She was systematically inserting herself into every corner of his life, weaving a web of control that was becoming more and more difficult to untangle. Matt, still physically weak and emotionally exhausted from the constant psychological warfare, was beginning to feel like a prisoner in his own home. He was surrounded by her influence, his access to his own doctors and finances now requiring her permission. Recognizing they were being outmaneuvered, Zach and Jeremy realized they couldn't win this battle on legal grounds alone. They needed leverage. They needed to crack the foundation of her story. That meant finding the one other person present at the scene of the crime, the mobile notary. Jeremy, always the more proactive of the two, took the lead. He found the company, QuickSign Mobile Notary, online. It was a small one-person operation run by a woman named Brenda. After several days of leaving messages, he finally got her on the phone. At first, she was defensive. I am a certified notary public. All my notarizations are legal and by the book. I cannot discuss the details of a client's signing. But Jeremy pressed, appealing to her conscience. This isn't about a simple document. This is about an elderly man who was heavily medicated before major surgery. He had no idea what he was signing. We believe he was taken advantage of. All we're asking is for you to tell us what you saw. Did he seem alert? Did he seem to understand the document? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Brenda's voice was much quieter when she finally spoke. Look, I could lose my license for this. I don't want to get involved. Jeremy knew he had an opening. He scheduled a time to meet her for coffee, promising discretion. While Jeremy pursued the notary, Zach made an even more difficult decision. He had to tell his mom. He drove to Amy's house, his stomach in knots. He sat at her kitchen table, the same table where they'd had 1,000 family meals, and laid out the entire sordid story. Amy listened intently, her expression shifting from shock to a deep, simmering anger that Zach recognized all too well. This wasn't just about Matt. This was about her children's birthright. I knew it, she said, her voice low and firm. I always knew there was something more to her. When she was the farm manager, I saw how she operated, always positioning herself, always making sure she was indispensable to your father. I warned him. For Amy, this was a moment of painful vindication, but her old frustrations with Matt were quickly overshadowed by a fierce, protective instinct for her sons. Your father can be a fool when it comes to people he wants to trust, she said, her gaze fixed on Zach. But that farm is as much your legacy as it is his. I sold my half to him with the understanding that it would be for the family. We are not going to let that woman steal it. In that moment, Amy Roloff, who had spent years trying to distance herself from the farm's drama, became a powerful and determined ally. She had her own network, her own history, and her own story to tell about Caryn's long game. The situation was now at a dangerous tipping point. A new explosive report has just reached us from an insider at the county planning office. A major real estate developer, known for building luxury housing communities, has made a formal multi-million-dollar offer on a massive, undeveloped 40-acre parcel of Roloff Farms, the very section Matt had always referred to as his legacy project. And according to the source, Caryn Chandler, acting as Matt Roloff's financial power of attorney, is fast-tracking the sale. The preliminary contracts have been drawn up. The sale would be irreversible, and the colossal sum of money would be deposited directly into a new corporate account that she alone controls. This was the endgame. It wasn't just about security anymore. It was a cash out, a liquidation of the family's heritage. At the same time, Jeremy's meeting with the notary, Brenda, yielded the bombshell they had been waiting for. After much convincing and an offer from the family lawyer to provide her with legal protection, Brenda finally broke her silence. She admitted that the signing was highly unusual. She recalled that Caryn had met her in the hospital lobby, paid her in cash, and rushed her upstairs. She described Matt as dazed and barely able to hold the pen. Most critically, she confessed that when she asked Matt the standard notary question, "Do you understand the document you are signing and its implications?" It was Caryn who answered for him, saying, "Yes, we do. We've been over it all. We're in a terrible hurry." This was the proof they needed, a sworn affidavit from the notary herself, confirming that Matt was not in a state to consent and that Caryn actively interfered in the notarization process. Armed with this new powerful evidence and with Amy now firmly in their corner, the Roloff children knew this was their last chance. A final, unavoidable confrontation was imminent. Our sources tell us that Zach, Jeremy, and Amy are on their way to the farmhouse right now. Caryn is reportedly there, meeting with the real estate developer to finalize the land sale agreement. The battle for Roloff Farms and for Matt Roloff's very freedom was about to reach its explosive climax, and no one, not even the family themselves, knew who would be left standing. We will continue to follow this story as it develops. Stay tuned to LPBW Update for the latest.